We continue now at the top of Daf Samachet Beis Mesechet Kesubos. This is Kesubos Daf 68b. Rebbe is continuing Kol Chada v'Chada de Nafsha Shakla. So Rebbe said, let's say you have multiple daughters. So Rebbe said the first one takes 1/10 of the property, the second one takes 1/10 of what's remaining, the third one 1/10 of what's remaining, and then they all divide it equally. But now the Gemara asks, why should that be? Everybody's taking what's rightfully theirs. The first one should take 1/10 of that exists. The second one should take 1/10 of the property that exists. Why should they redistribute all of what they took so that they all get an even amount? And the Gemara answers, no, Hachi. This is what Rebbe was saying. Imbo kulam lihinase ka'achas. If they both want to marry at the same time, let's say it's not one after the other, it's not sequential, but it's all at the same time. So then everyone takes 1/10. The first one takes 1/10 of the property. The next one takes 1/10 of what's remaining. The third one 1/10 of what's remaining from there, and then cholkos b'shava, and then they divide it all up evenly. And the Gemara says, Messiah Leila Rav Masna. This is a support for what Rav Masna said. The Yamar Rav Masna, because Rav Masna said, in Boli Nase Kulam Ka'achas, let's say they all get married at the same time, Notlos Isser Echad, then they all take 1/10. Isser Echad Salkadaitach, what, you think they take a total of 1/10? Of course not. Ela Notlos Isser Ke'echad. Rather, what it means is that they take it all at the same time. They're going to divide up evenly everything that they take. And the Gemara continues, Tanu Rabbanon, the rabbis taught, Habanos, when it comes to the daughters, Bein Bagru ad shelo nisu, uvein nisu ad shelo bagru, whether they became bogereses before they got married, or whether they got married and they were not yet full adults, Ivdu mizonos, saying they lose their mizonos, v'lo ivdu parnasasan, but they don't lose their dowry, divrei Rebbe, that's the opinion of Rebbe. Rashi over here says, Ivdu mizonos, saying, why do they lose their mizonos? Shekach kosavlan, because that's how it's written over to them. Oad tivgaron, oad tilkachon legovern, it says, until you become bogeres, or until you're taken by a man, you're taken to be married, and at that point in time, when you become either a bogeres, or you get married, you're going to lose out on your mizonos. But again, according to Rebbe, they will not lose the parnasa, they will not lose the dowry. And the Gemara continues, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, Af ivdu parnasas, and they even lose out on the parnasa, they lose out on the dowry as well. And Rashi says, Af ivdu parnasas, on Isser Nechasim, we're talking here about the 10th of the property that they get for the dowry. To kasavar lo tikan lo nedunya, lahecha de minsava bekatanas o benaras. The halach is that according to Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, they only get the nedunya, they only get the dowry if they get married, as either if she gets married, either as a katana or as a nara. Aval bagro estalko lamehi beisa legam. But once she becomes a bogeres, that's what Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar is saying. If she becomes a bogeres and she hasn't yet gotten married, she will not get that 1/10 for the nedunya. And Rashi also says, "V'chein nisas benaros." Let's say she gets married as a nara. Ho'elu gedolihi v'nisratzes if the parnasasa. Since she is an adult and she's agreed, so she does lose out. Elamasha pasku, except for what might have been pledged. Aval benisas bekatanas lo polig. But the point is that Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar is not arguing when she gets married as a katana. According to Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, when she gets married as a katana, she certainly will get the parnasa. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar is saying, though, however, if she became an adult, so then she will lose out on that dowry. And the Gemara continues, according to Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, Keitzad heinoso. So what should they do in order not to lose out on the dowry? Sochros len bailim motzian len parnasas, and they should hire for themselves husbands, and that way they can get their parnasa, their dowry. As Rashi says, Sochros len bailim sheyisu osan ad shelo yivgur. In other words, find husbands to marry them before they become full adults. Umotziam lehem parnasasam. That way they'll be able to get that 1/10 of the property for the dowry, because they won't yet be adults when they're getting married. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Nachman said, Amar li Huna said to me, Hilchasaka Rebbe, that the halacha in terms of this machlokas between Rebbe and Rav Shimon ben Elazar, the halacha is like Rebbe, and they do not lose out on their parnasa. And the Gemara continues, Eisvei Rava Rav Nachman. Rava asks Rav Nachman the following question from our Mishnah. Yisoma shisiyasa imo achem midaita. Let's say you have a case of an orphan girl. She's married off by her mother, her brother, with her consent. V'chazvu lo b'meo b'chamishim zuz, and they write for her a small dowry of 100 or 50 zuz. Yecholihi mishatagdil lahotzi miyada masharoi li nasin la. So when she becomes an adult, she's going to be able to get the 1/10 that she really should be getting for the dowry. And so the Gemara says, time with the katana, the reason of the Mishnah is because she got married as a katana. That's why she's entitled to the 1/10. Hagadola vitra, but apparently if she would have been an adult, if she would not get married until she was an adult, so then she would give up on the dowry. That sounds like Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar, who says, Ivdu parnasasan, they lose out on the dowry. It doesn't sound like Rebbe. And the Gemara says, no, really, it is Rebbe, lo kasha, it's not difficult. Hada machoy, hada lo machoy. It depends. In one case, if she protests, if she asks for the dowry, that's when Rebbe says that she gets the dowry. That's when she gets the parnasa. But in our Mishnah, where it seems like she's losing out as an adult, that's because she was not mocha, she didn't protest at all, she didn't ask for it, and therefore in that situation, she actually would lose out. And the Gemara continues, Hachinami mistabra. It makes sense to say like this. It makes sense according to Rebbe to say that there's going to be some cases where she'll lose the dowry and some not. The Yimkain kasha de Rebbe ad Rebbe, because if you don't make that distinction, you're going to have a contradiction in Rebbe. The Tanya, because we learned in a brayso, Rebbe Omer Rebbe says, Bas hani zonos min ha'achin. If you have a daughter who's getting mizonos from the brothers, now who gets mizonos from the brothers? That's talking about a situation of a katana. No telas isser nechasim. She's the one that gets the 1/10 of the property. If she's getting mizonos, then she gets the dowry. So that's a contradiction to what Rebbe said before, because here it implies nizonos in she'ena nizonos lo. It sounds like only a katana who gets mizonos is able to get the dowry, and if she's not getting mizonos, she doesn't get the dowry. And Rebbe said before, the way we quoted Rebbe above, was that she gets the dowry regardless. Elalav shmamina, rather than not what we said above. You see from this, we make a distinction between when she protests and when she doesn't protest. Sometimes she gets it and sometimes she does not get it. Shmamina, and the Gemara says, indeed, we see that Rebbe makes that distinction. And the Gemara continues, Amar le Ravina le Rava. Ravina said to Rava, Amar lon Ravada barava mishmech. Ravada barava said to us in your name, meaning in Rava's name, the following halacha, Bagra eina tzricha limchos. If she becomes an adult, she does not need a protest in order to get the dowry. Nisas eina tzricha limchos. Let's say she gets married, she doesn't need a protest in order to get the dowry. But Bagra v'nisas, but if she becomes an adult and she gets married, so in such a situation, tzricha limchos, in such a situation, she will be required to protest in order to get that 1/10 of the property for the dowry. And the Gemara now says, Miyama Rava Hachi, but is that really the case? Did Rava really say this? Va'ezvei Rava Rav Nachman, but we just saw above that Rava asked Rav Nachman a question from our Mishnah, Yisoma, by the case of the Yisoma. V'shani lei, and he answered him, Hadamachi, Hadalom Machi, that Rebbe makes a distinction between a situation where she protests and she does not protest. And Rashi over here explains, Eina tzricha limchos, again Rava said in these situations of, let's say, a bogeres, or let's say she gets married, she doesn't need a protest. Shafilu lo mechsa, even if she doesn't protest, lo ivda isur nechos, she doesn't lose out on that 1/10 of the property for the dowry. And so the Gemara then asked, but didn't we make a distinction in the Mishnah of Vishanile, and we answered as follows, the Hadatani Gedola Vitra, we said that which the Mishnah implies that if she's an adult, then she gives up on that dowry property, Bidelo Machoy, that's talking about when she doesn't protest. If she doesn't say anything, then she loses out. And how do we understand Gedol over there? Alma, we see from there, Nisis Benarus, let's say she gets married even as a Nara, let's say not as a Bogeris. She gets married as a Nara, Velo Michsen, she doesn't protest, Afa Bishaina Bogeris, even though she's not yet a Bogeris, so she just has one of the two items, she's married but she's not a Bogeris, but if she doesn't protest, apparently Vitra, apparently she gives up. Viat Amr, but you just said, Nisis Eina Tzricha Limchos Va'afilu Nara. You said that if she gets married, she doesn't need a protest, even if she's a Nara, she needs to be both married and a Bogeris to be in that situation, so that's the contradiction. And so the Gemara answers to that, Lokash, it's not difficult, Hadaka Mitzana Minayu, Hadaloka Mitzana Minayu. In one case we're talking when she takes mizonos from them, in the other case we're talking where she does not take mizonos from them, and Rashi over here explains, Hada Amar Rava Nisis Benarus Eina Tzricha Limchos. When Rava said that, let's say she gets married as a Nara, so now she's married but she's not yet a Bogeris, she doesn't need a protest, so that's Kegon to Kamitzana Minayu, that's if she's getting mizonos from the brothers, La'achar Shenisas, even after she's married, the Mishum to Kamitzana Minayu, because since she's taking mizonos from them, Hu de Kashaska, that's why she's being quiet, she's embarrassed to say anything, V'lo Mochla Parnasasa, but she's not being mochel on her parnas, on her dowry, she gets the dowry. V'hadu Katani HaGedola Vich, but then when we said that if she's a Gedola, she does give up on it and she needs to protest, otherwise she loses it, the Lo Kamitzana, that's when she's not taking mizonos from them, so she really shouldn't be embarrassed, she should have said something, and if she doesn't say anything and she's an adult, so she is going to lose out in that situation. And so what then emerges over here according to Rebbe is that Rebbe would say, let's say she's an adult, but even a Nara, not a Bogeres, let's say she's a Nara who is married, so then if she doesn't say anything, she's going to lose out on her dowry. However, let's say she's getting mizonos from them, she's embarrassed to say something, so then she will not lose out just because she doesn't say anything. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Huna Amar Rebbe, Rav Huna says, the Rebbe says, Parnasa eino ketnai ksuba. Parnasa is not the same as other stipulations in the ksuba. The Gemara says, Ma eino ketnai ksuba. What does that mean that Parnasa is not like other stipulations in the ksuba? Inema de ilu Parnasa tarfa mi meshavdi. If you're going to say that whereas by Parnasa, so she can collect from the chasim meshubadim property that was sold off but has a lien on it, utnai ksuba lo tarfa mi meshavdi. That's only true by Parnasa, it's only true by the dowry, but by the stipulations of the ksuba, she's not allowed to collect from the chasim meshubadim. But my kamash malon, but if that's what he's saying, what's the chiddush? Hamaisim b'chol yom, we know this anyway, this is incidents every day. Motzian le Parnasa vein motzian le mizonos. When it comes to Parnasa, we're motzian, we collect even from the chasim nechasim mishubadim. When it comes to mizonos, we do not, and mizonos would be considered like Tanai Ksuba. And so the Gemara says, ve'ela, rather what he means to say is as follows. De'ilu parnasa gavya nami mimetaltali. When it comes to parnasa, when it comes to the dowry, so we can say that you can collect even from metaltalin, even from movable property. Utanai Ksuba mimekarkoi gavya mimetaltali lo gavya. When it comes to the stipulations of the Ksuba, so that you can only collect from land and not from movable property. But that's not true. L'Rebbe, according to Rebbe, idi v'idi megavya gavya. By both of them, you're allowed to collect. You're allowed to collect from karka and from metaltalin when it comes to the Tanai Ksuba. The Tanya, as we learned in a brayso, echad nechasim sheyesh lan achrayis, whether you're talking about property with achrayis, meaning land, v'echad nechasim shein lan achrayis, or if you're talking about nechasim without achrayis, meaning movable property, motziim lamazon isha v'labanos, you're allowed to use that for the mizonos of the wife and for the daughters. Divrei Rebbe, that's the opinion of Rebbe. So in that sense, they're both identical. Both of them can be collected from both karka and metaltalin. And so the Gemara instead says, Elamai parnasa eina ketanai ksuba. Rather, what does it mean that parnasa is not like stipulations in the ksuba? L'chidetanya, it's for the following brayso. Ha'omer al yizonu benosa min nechasav. If somebody were to say, I don't want my daughters, he says he doesn't want his daughters to get mizonos from his property, ein shomin lo, we don't listen to him. But al yisparnasu benosa min nechasav. But if he says he doesn't want his daughters to get parnasa, to get the nedunya, the dowry from his property, shomin lo, we do listen to him. Sha parnasa eina ketanai ksuba, because parnasa is not the same as Tanai Ksuba. And Rashi over here explains, the Gemara said that when it comes to parnasa, to the dowry, so then she can collect from the chasim mishubadim, imeshavdi, even from the chasim mishubadim, meaning to say, shashibdu achin velo shashibir av, we're talking about nechasim mishubadim, that there's a lien on the property from the brothers, not from the father. But when it comes to mizonos, lo tar from imeshavdi, she cannot collect from the chasim mishubadim, afilu shibdu achin, even if it was the brothers who put a lien on that property, she cannot get mizonos from that property. How do we know that? It's not, that's a Mishnah. The Mishnah says, "Ein motzian la'achilas peiros u'leshevach karkos u'lemazon ha'isha v'abanos." It talks about the mazon ha'isha, the mizonos. You can't take min nechasim mishubadim. You can't take from the nechasim mishubadim. Mimnei tikkun ha'olam, because that's a way that's considered tikkun ha'olam. Otherwise, there's going to be problems. Aval parnasa tarfa. But when it comes to her parnasa, to the dowry, she could take from the nechasim mishubadim. The shavyua rabbanon kebal chov beiser nechasim, because the rabbanon say that she's considered like a bal chov, like someone collecting a debt when it comes to that 1/10 of the property. Mishamei sa'ah, from the time that the father dies. The davar katzavu, because that's a set amount. So if it's a set amount, we say it's as if there's a bal chov who's coming to collect 1/10 of the property, and we say that property, therefore there's any property that the brothers have now inherited, there's a shibud on that property, and she's allowed to collect. Afal mizonos elam kitzva, when it comes to the mizonos, there's no set amount. So therefore, v'yesh ba mivnei tikkun olam, it would be inappropriate to say she could collect from the chasim mishubadim. If the brothers go sell off the property, now she can collect that because it's not a set amount. It would be difficult for the lekuchos, for the purchasers, to be careful regarding that issue. And Rashi over here continues, Lamazon ha'isha v'abanos. Again, when it comes to mizonos, you can collect from metaltalin even. V'chol shekein parnasa, certainly when it comes to the dowry, you can collect from metaltalin. V'lomi boy parnasa lafila mizonos. We don't even need to say by parnasa, it's even mizonos. The salkadai techamina came in the Tanai Ksuba ninu. I might have thought, since the mizonos is a stipulation in the Ksuba, nahavik ksuba, maybe it should be like the Ksuba itself. V'lo nigvu mi metaltalin, maybe you can't collect from metaltalin. Kamash malan, that's what we're saying over here. Both of those items can be collected from metaltalin. And then it says, Omer b'shas misa. So let's say a person says at the time of his death he doesn't want his daughters to get mizonos, so that's not going to work. But if he says dowry, he doesn't want them to get the dowry, that does work. Al yizona b'nosa min nechasav ein shomin lo. So ishtabed b'tanai ksuba, that's part of the Tanai Ksuba. He can't take away the Tanai Ksuba, he can't take away the mizonos. But al yispardas shomin lo shaparnasa eina chova olav. When it comes to parnasa, the dowry, that's not an obligation of his. Tanai Ksuba, like the Tanai Ksuba, like the stipulations in the Ksuba. Elachov ala yisomim, that's an obligation upon the yisomim that they have to provide. In a situation where the father didn't say not to support, if the father didn't say anything, so then it's an obligation on the yisomim. But again, if the father says he doesn't want the parnasa to go to his daughter, so then there would be no such obligation. And we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Samech Tes Amud Aleph.